Clean, and today I'll be discussing my top tips on how strength and conditioning can help you mitigate injury. So, whether you're a footballer and you're in pre-season and you're looking to reduce the likelihood of soft tissue injuries, mainly around groins, so around the hip area, hip flexor, and adductors, hamstring strains, and calf strains. So, the soft tissue injuries, the things that we can have more control over when we're trying to prevent injuries, compared to things like your collision-based injuries, with AFL being a 360-degree natured sport. There's, of course, some injuries that we simply cannot prevent that are just simply bad timing, bad luck by the athlete being in that vulnerable position. However, the tips that I provide you, the footballer, or for developing strength and conditioning coaches looking to work in football, Australian rules football, these tips are easily practical and can be easily applied into not only an AFL setting, but your semi-professional programs, your VFL, SANFL, waffle clubs, as well as, of course, community level. So let's dive straight into it. Stick around for the very end as well. I'll provide some power tips on how you can promote your own podcast. So I'm doing an Academy Get Better Plan episode here at 1 o'clock, so in 45 minutes for our Academy members, but I'll provide a little bit of context around that for those listening into the podcast on what you can get out of our Academy, as well as our upcoming week. We've got a massive show and episodes to be released in this week, and also a podcast promo. It's something I've been doing the last few weeks where I listen to a whole range of different podcasts, from business, social, marketing podcasts to high performance educational podcasts. So this week will be on marketing, a podcast that I listen to, and I'll share a favorite episode from that one from the last week. But let's get into it. So firstly, strength and conditioning coaches, we like to profile and develop what we call a needs analysis. This is critical in that it helps us make sound decisions for the athletes that we're working with. Obviously, working in a large group, you maybe managing a group of up to 45 athletes. We don't need to individualize every single detail, every rep, every set, every exercise they're doing. There is value and research on being able to get the athlete to do as much of what the group's doing as possible. As we know, with team-based athletes, that sense of belonging and being part of a group is really, really important to them. For their level of motivation and also for their intent point of view. As soon as you bunch a group of athletes together, they're going to get competitive, they're going to lift a bit heavier, they're going to run a bit faster. So the quality of training is definitely enhanced. So we don't want to remove the athlete from the group where possible. However, there's definitely some need for individualizing and slightly tweaking some of the program, whether it be on the gym, in their prep for their field sessions, or in their conditioning. So I want to dive into those today and provide some sound tips on how you can do that for the footballer, but also for high performance staff listening in, that you can apply to your programming. So profile your athletes. How do you do that? We want to try and get a range of different measures, different information from not just the physical, but also how the coaches want them to play, so the position they're playing. We want to know medical history, so some questionnaires that either the medical team are getting that you can access, or you have to conduct it yourself. So understanding where they've come from, particularly if you're new to the club or new to the team, so you've got a background knowledge on injuries that they've suffered and how that may influence how you prepare them. And of course, your classic tests like a aerobic fitness test to see how fit they are. As we know, athletes with a higher aerobic capacity, not only will have a bigger output on the game, but they'll actually recover better from the game leading into the next training session. Therefore, put them themselves at a lower risk of overloading and putting them at risk of injury. So aerobic fitness is really important for mitigating injuries. Our sprint speed is important, so we can work out things like their anaerobic speed reserve when we're doing our repeat speed conditioning, which is really important for football, both for mitigating injuries by building that tissue resilience and capacity, but also from a performance point of view. So if we can work out that ASR through their max velocity and then their max aerobic speed, which we can get from like their 2K time trial, then we can put them into appropriate running groups that will stretch every athlete in that group. Whereas if you just do tempo-based programming, you're probably going to stretch the lower end guys, the guys that didn't perform too well on the test that aren't aerobically fit. Your top end athletes, guys and girls, are going to find that pretty comfortable, and then you'll have your middle ground athletes that may be stretched at times, but at other times find it easy. Maybe they're more speed based, so the repeat speed sessions they're comfortable, and it's not really pushing them too hard. And then you're on the endurance days, the big stretch. So if you can break it up and program according to where that athlete sits and what they need to play their position, but also accommodate their strengths and weaknesses. So, for example, your speed-based athletes are going to do really well on your more glycolytic days, your fast twitch days, so your sprinting sessions, your repeat speed days, but they're not going to handle as well your aerobic work to rest ratios where you might be doing 2-to-1, for example. They're going to be highly stressed doing those both psychologically, but also physically. They're going to find that really challenging. Where your aerobic athletes are going to be the opposite. The speed days are going to be massively taxing on them, but they'll need to really be pushed on their aerobic days to be able to get continual adaptation. So providing that profile analysis, other tests like the having some objective measures around their eccentric hamstring strength, as we know, under 400 newtons on the NOR board puts them at risk for soft tissue injury. So we want to be able to have some form of measure. Now, if you don't have a NOR board, you can simply use like a remaining deadlift and making sure they're having minimal knee bend. So you're getting good length through the hamstring to test their eccentric strength. You'd focus more on tempo work, so controlling the stretch phase of the RDL. You could do your single leg sliders to also work on it, hamstring machine, and you're really focusing on that lengthening of the hamstring when you're doing those exercises. So some form of eccentric strength work, some form of measure and work on strengthening our groins. So the Copenhagen, long leg of a Copenhagen is a great one because it's lengthening the adductors, and you need to have good co-contraction of the trunk as well as the glutes to be able to maintain that side plank position with good form and good posture. So Copenhagen is a great exercise. If you've got the valve like force frame, you could use the testing their groin squeeze, both at 60 and 90 degrees or at 0, to be able to get some quantitative data to see how their adductor strength is in maximal isometric squeeze. Our key strength exercises, so having an understanding of how well they can produce max force in the squat, deadlift, and bench press. So you can measure those movements if you haven't got force decks, or you can measure some isometric testing with an isometric mid-thigh pull and a back squat iso to get a good understanding of how they're producing force through different limbs. And that can give you an understanding on how well they're tracking their strength development. We want to have an idea of their abduction strength, or their glute med strength, ability to externally rotate at the hip, and as I mentioned, their adduction is strength, and what's the ratio between those two. So we want to have a clean ratio both from your ability to generate force through your groins as well as your glutes through external rotation, but also want to have see what's the symmetry like between limbs. Now we know with AFL footballers there's going to be an asymmetry, but if they're above 10% on either side, perhaps that might be putting them at risk. So you might want to put a program in place to make sure they're doing unilateral work, and maybe their weaker side, they're always starting when they're fresh on the set. So if they're doing a set of single leg RDLs and they've got a deficit on their left side for external rotation, then you might focus on doing that left side first whenever they do that exercise and do their right side next. Little things like that. And cueing the athlete, of course, as well, to make sure they're not dumping into like knee valgus. They're getting an understanding of the role the big toe has, as well as making sure that they're active through their glute med when they're doing hip hinging and their squatting patterns. So like single leg squats, really, really important. Another great way that you can develop glute strength if they've got an imbalance there. So you can see how by hosting a battery of tests, you can identify areas of needs for your group. So if largely there's a large group that need more hip abduction, then you can be thinking, okay, I'm going to make sure that we've got some unilateral work there where they have to stabilize their hips. I might put some isolation glute work in the off season and maintain it throughout the season. So like your side plank abduction, hip raise, or a cable hip hitch into a leg abduction, so you can target those areas in their injury mitigation and talk to the fact that those movements are in there specifically for that athlete. So you can target it from a group, but also you can target it for individual. Maybe there might be just a few that simply just need that extra work. In the last 10 minutes of their gym program, they're doing that, or they've got a couple of exercises they need to do that's specific to them before they take on the field. So as part of their performance prep. Hip flexion and hip extension, another couple of really important. So as you can see with Australian rules football, because of the nature of the sport, it's so demanding on the body, particularly on the lower legs, around the hips. We want to make sure that we've got a good information around how the athlete is producing force, any potential chinks in the armor that they need extra work to do to pick up that area. So it's not putting either that body part at risk or other areas at risk. So that would be the more clinical tests. Then we want to have an understanding of how they move. So just simply filming them when they're sprinting, their change of direction at maximal speed and under a reactive component. So doing some agility or just simply playing the game in a small-sided game of football. How well they receive contact and tackle an opponent. How they're positioning their body when they're being tackled. And not only from a prevention point of view, but also from a performance point of view. Are they dropping their body height before they tackle? Are they looking at the hips? Do they know how to position their head? All these things can help mitigate injuries. And then having a reactive strength index testing. So if you do have force decks, doing like a single leg drop jump to get an idea of how well they can absorb force and excel and also generate force. So looking at the mechanics of that, are they favoring one side? Are they not as confident on one side? And then you can put in some drills to be able to make sure that we've got good plyometric ability and you've got good foot stiffness that's going to carry through on reducing your contact time when you're sprinting or change direction on the field, which is just going to reduce the amount of load going through the body. So making sure we've got a good understanding of how well they can absorb force at a fast velocities. So that would be give yourself a nutshell. And obviously we use that testing to then prescribe our program. And for some athletes, the main group programming is going to serve them best. For others, due to their injury history, due to what we've found in the testing, due to how the coaches want them to play, maybe in a different position, we can use that information to prioritize and build them a smart program to adjust it. So if this is something that you're interested in having and you don't have a strength and conditioning coach that can individualize for you, our coaches do offer this. So we can work on our individualized coaching package to give you that AFL experience, just like we do with AFL athletes. So if this is something that interests you, make sure to head over to preparelikeapro.com or email me at jack@preparelikeapro.com and I'll get in contact with you, give you a call. There's a questionnaire to fill out to get this information that we talked about, and you have a coach in your corner that you're able to catch up with on a monthly basis for a field session, gym session, or a Zoom consultation if you're remote or life's busy. And you're able to also have a customized program, both in the gym and with your running, that's tailored to you. So you can really maximize your development and get the results that you deserve, which will ultimately improve your confidence and ability to play at your best for the upcoming season. So if that interests you and the things that I talked about is something that you want, or perhaps you're a parent that you want your child to have, then get in contact and we'll see if we can be a good fit and who's the best coach that's closest to you to be able to deliver that program and ultimately help you get to the next level. In terms of promoting for this week's podcast, I really liked the Marketing School, Neil Patel and Eric Sue's podcast. It was episode 2376, all about how to maximize your search engine optimization. So what they talked about was not just always spending your time on creating new content, but actually enhancing the content that you've currently created using Google Analytics, research the posts, the blog posts on your website that have taken a hit over the last year and boost them with some new, fresh content. So you don't need to create a new post, just simply spend time. And Neil actually mentioned how 90% of his team's time is spent on increasing the value of his current content, and that maximizes the views on that content. So that's something that really resonated with me. For the last couple of years, all I've done is focus on creating new content. But ultimately, if your content isn't being seen, there's no point creating new content. So spend more time and energy creating more value and the content that you have created, enhancing that. So it's going to be ranked better on Google, but ultimately you're going to help more people. So that's hopefully some advice. I would make sure to listen to that one. It's like 10 minutes long, highly practical, and they're two experts in the marketing game that I love listening to their podcast. That's a shout out to their marketing school podcast. In terms of our podcast for the upcoming week, we have the head of sports science at the Collingwood Football Club, Billy Hewlin, who I interviewed a couple of weeks ago. Absolutely fantastic episode that will be released this Wednesday. So make sure to tune in for that one. We discussed everything from how to have a scientific approach, how to apply the research in an elite sports setting. He's got a great experience working in rugby, working in Cricket Australia, and now in the AFL. So make sure to tune into there. That will be released on Wednesday. Our live episodes for the week, I've got 2 interviews this week. So one with David Joyce, 3 p.m. this Thursday, 3rd of March. He is a high-performance consultant that's worked across the AFL, English Premier League, and rugby. Extensive background, and he'll be great to have onto the show. So we'll be discussing mental performance that will be highly engaging for both staff working in high performance, but also for athletes. So make sure to tune in this Thursday at 3 o'clock. And then my second interview would be with Cullen Ball, who's recently just moved to the Western Sydney Wanderers as head physiotherapist. He was recommended by Shane Land to come on the show, and he wants to discuss how physiotherapists could benefit from thinking more like a strength and conditioning coach. So more and more are we seeing us collaborate more closely together, the physiotherapists, the strength and conditioning, high performance staff, and trying to think the same way. So it'd be really cool to hear that insight from Cullen on how he goes about doing that, and some effective tips and tricks for physiotherapists that want to enhance their ability to coach in the gym and on the field. So make sure to tune in. That will be 4 p.m. on Friday, the 4th of March. And if you've got any questions for either David Joyce or Cullen Ball, make sure to hit us up on our socials, and I'll do my best to add that to the run sheet so you can hear your answer on the podcast. And then our bite-sized episode, which we release every Friday from an old episode that had a great impact and perhaps needs some resurfacing. And that this week it will be with Jackie Lauder, who is the Melbourne Storm's exercise and sports psychologist. So if you love that bite-sized episode, make sure to search for Jackie Lauder in our Prepare Like a Pro podcast on your favorite podcast directory to listen to the full episode. That's it for this week. I'm looking forward to catching up with Academy members in 30 minutes. So if you're listening to this live, I'll see you in the Academy. I've sent out the Zoom link for those that have just recently joined the Academy or are interested. It's only $20 a month. There's a Coaches Academy, there's a Footballers Academy, and I catch up once a month to share what has worked for me in either business sense or a strength and conditioning sense. And for the footballers, I usually share a topic and present on a topic that's the Academy members have reached out and would like me to present on. So the presentation usually goes for 20 to 30 minutes, but the most engaging aspect of these is the Q&A at the end. We have a great discussion. So if you're listening in, I'll see you guys in 30 minutes. Make sure to bring all your questions. And for those that aren't a part of the Academy, head over to preparelikeaproacademy.com.au to sign up and join our community. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you on the next episode.